Alright, so ALS recently dropped a Fate update, and they actually showed some love to the old units. Some of them got buffed, some of them got nerfed. Overall, it really changed the meta of the game. So in this video, I'm going to be making a new tier list with all the updated balance changes and new units. If you enjoyed the video, maybe leave a like or subscribe. But anyways, let's get into it. Okay, so real quick before we get started, I'm going to throw all the balance changes on screen for you guys. I will go over them later in the video, so if you do forget, it's not a huge deal. And by the way, sorry if you can tell I'm sick, whether it be through my voice or where I rank the units, I'm feeling a little bit under the weather. So go easy on me in the comments, okay? With that being said, let's go make a tier list. Okay, before I go ahead and rank these units, let me go over what all the different tiers mean. So of course we have meta here, which is going to be the best units in the game, very, very good for a lot of stages. And we have sub-meta, which they're still really good overall, they're still in the meta of the game. Then we have amazing, which are really good units, but just not the top of the game anymore. Then we have decent, which are units that are still usable, just kind of falling off as time goes on. Then support is of course going to be units that are only really supporting value for their team. They don't do too much damage themselves. So starting with the godlies here, we have Pride. I'd say that Pride is definitely a meta unit now. He did recently get buffed, and they increased, I believe, his final upgrade damage, which is going to make him more expensive, but he is still definitely meta, because he does have good early placement damage, and then later becomes full AoE. He also has one of the better godly leads out of all the different godly units, so his team buff is very good for that too. Next we have Sukuna, and Sukuna, I'd say, he's kind of weird because they once again only buffed his final upgrade, and because he's more of like an infinite unit. I'd say he's still, oops, how did sub-meta get down there? I'd say he's still kind of meta. He's just kind of sub-meta. You know, he's in the meta, but he's not like the top of the game because he's really only usable in infinites. His placement damage is kind of still lacking. It's kind of getting outdated, but after the buff, his infinite potential is huge. So definitely top of sub-meta there. Next we have Dio, and this guy, I don't know. It's weird because they didn't buff him with the new rebalance changes. So he's still kind of exactly how he was before, but they did fix his time stop not working. So he is more of a meta support now, but I'd say if you were to rank him based on damage, he is still definitely going to be in sub-meta. He has really good, huge full AoE range, but he is really expensive for infinites, kind of like Sukuna. Overall though, he's more of a support now because his damage doesn't keep up with like the top of the top units in the game. Next we have Ichigo, and a lot of you who've tuned into my streams probably know that I'm a #1 Ichigo hater. I've always kind of hated the unit, but he did get buffed, and I gotta admit that he is really, really good. Once again, they buffed his final upgrade damage. I believe they might have made him a little bit more expensive too. They did that with a lot of the units this update. I'd say he definitely is meta though. In terms of stats, I'd say he's probably better than Pride, but because his godly buff is really bad, I think that Pride overall is like the better unit to go for if you're new to the game especially. Ichigo is really good though, as an early game unit only costing 650, and his final upgrade damage getting buffed is going to make him pretty good in pretty much every game mode, like infinites. Goku here, very, very strong. He didn't get buffed because he's so new, but he is just a very good godly. For a while, I'd say he was the best, but after the buffs, I don't really know. If you were to rank him on damage, he is still going to be in the meta tier. His damage is crazy, especially combined with his passives. But yeah, he has multiple passives. He has, I think, 2 abilities. I heard he might have had his nuke removed, the final Kamehameha, but I know that he at least has Honed Body, which is going to apply a 25% extra damage debuff to every enemy. Then also he has the Divine Mastery passive, which is going to put a little Gojo bubble around him that is going to make enemies slow down and take more damage. So I'd say he does really good damage, but he's mostly going to be in the support tier, just like Dio. Definitely the top of the support tier though, because he is still very crazy. Moving on to Needle Queen, away from the godlies. Needle Queen is kind of a weird unit because she got buffed when Perfect Seal was nerfed, but she overall still doesn't do like the best damage. She's very amazing for progressive modes like Legend stages where the element is going to be changing. She'll be doing extra damage to all of them. Overall, she is definitely top of amazing, but not really meta anymore. Next we have Shanks, which is going to be pretty much purely a support unit now for infinite leaderboard runs. Ryuk is okay. This is a unit from the Halloween update that was kind of disappointing, but he does have like a little gimmick where he's going to have a chance to one-shot every enemy in the stage except for bosses. Like anything he attacks can be one-shot, so I'd say he's probably top of decent. He's really situational. Like you could use him in infinites, but he was really good when Rukia had a perma-stun bug, but without like proper slowdown, his 3% or 5% chance to insta-kill the enemies doesn't really get much value. Moving on, we now have a buffed unit. This guy's going to be kind of weird to talk about. So this is a Black Clover unit introduced in the early stages of World 2. He used to be really outdated, but he got buffed with the Fate update with a lot of the other Black Clover units. And the thing about the buff is they did make him a lot more expensive. They did that with a lot of the units where they have like a higher infinite ceiling pretty much. but his damage is crazy on his final upgrades, and he does now have his stun passive back. They gave him back his stun passive. They took it away for a while because he does have a time stop, but now that he has both a stun passive and a time stop, and also just a ton of really good damage, I'd say he's definitely in the meta. He is more of a support again with the stun and the time stop, but his damage is crazy enough to be meta for sure. Shadow is kind of getting outdated. He does still have some pretty okay damage on placement for, I believe, 1.5k cost, but he's gonna shine in infinites for his full AoE and 10 billion damage nuke, which can also heal the base but not go past the cap. He's okay. I'd probably put him in amazing, somewhere around here. He's still usable, really good, but not quite the top of the game anymore. Turbo is in a similar situation, I think. I do have a video on this guy. He's always been kind of situational to only be an early game unit. He is an early game ground unit with the electrified passive, which with really good placement damage, but not many upgrades to carry on into high waves. I'd say he's either in decent, like high decent, or low amazing. Probably high decent for now. He's alright. Whitebeard, this is a new unit with the tournament update, I believe. He's really good. He does have a really solid amount of damage on placement for only 2k cost. He also does get the cripple passive later on, and has his own passive, which I believe is a chance to stun the enemies for 10 seconds. I think it's 10 seconds. I'll throw it on screen. He also has an ability which is going to be kind of like a nuke that does a lot of his damage over time in a bunch of different ticks. So I'd say he's probably in meta for sure, but not quite at the top of the game like these guys are. Wind Prince did get buffed. This is another Black Clover unit that got buffed, and I've seen him. He does do some really good damage, but I don't actually have one invested myself. It's kind of weird for me to talk about it because I haven't really used him much. But I'd say he's probably in low sub-meta to high amazing. He does have his slow passive back now and does some pretty good damage. I believe they made him a little bit more expensive though, just like a lot of the units that got buffed. This is kind of like a weird placement for me. I will admit I don't know much about this guy, but I'd say he is really, really good from what I've seen after the buffs. Toto has always been kind of like a support unit. He does have the Boogie Woogie ability, which can rewind enemies, and then also the stun passive, which I think at some point did become either cripple or electrified, but he does start with stun on placement, so he can be used early game. Overall, he is a support, and I put him probably right about here. Vegeta, now this guy was bugged for a while and had the highest damage per attack in the game, like billions of damage per attack. I do have a video on that. But now that the bug is gone and he can only get his passive so high, his damage is kind of lacking, I would say. He's not the worst. He is probably either low amazing to high decent. I put him low amazing for now. He's alright. Now, I don't even know how to say this guy's name. Okay, Whis, I think? Don't get mad at me in the comments. I haven't watched Dragon Ball. But this guy is very good if paired with Beerus because they buff each other. I believe he gets a 100% range boost if he's with Beerus, and then Beerus also gives a damage boost if he's with him. So, Whis is more of a support. He does do some pretty solid damage for being a support, but he also has the rewind ability, which is really nice. That's like his main value. And he is going to buff Beerus, which is really cool too. Mostly a support unit again, probably better than Toto, honestly. And then Beerus, I'll just go ahead and rank him too because they do need to buff each other. So Beerus, I'd say, is probably somewhere in sub-meta, maybe like here, I guess. Law has always been kind of a support. He starts off with electrified and then it becomes slow. He has the rewind passive, which I think is called Shambles or Room or something. Rewinds the enemies though, and he's kind of like Toto, I guess, and I put him like right about here. Apprentice Kai, both the Fusion and First Evolution form got nerfs this update. So the Fusion form got the cap of his damage increasing passive lowered, so he got nerfed. Then he also got his Fear passive taken away, which is really tragic. He's always been kind of like an infinite unit, very expensive like Sukuna, 5k to place I think. But he does have a 10% damage buff like Quincy King and Ichigo, so that's pretty cool. And he also has electrified full AoE on placement, on final upgrade, sorry. And I think he has a nuke as well. So he does have a lot of utility. He's very similar to Sukuna. I think Sukuna overall does like more damage and gets more damage value out of his nukes. And then Zamasu is kind of more like a support-oriented infinite unit like Sukuna. He does have the highest AoE damage in the game though. Brook is kind of a support unit. His damage is kind of lacking now, but he does have the Frostbite passive, which the only other unit with that I believe is Rukia. So they're both just kind of Frostbite supports here. I think Brook would go right here, and then Rukia I'd probably put here because I think she has both Freeze and Frostbite. But Brook is also a very solid support. I don't know, these ones are all kind of like different status effects. If you're running a leaderboard team, you'll have different people running different units, so take these rankings with a grain of salt here. Vegito Blue did get nerfed this update, so they kind of reduced his damage overall. He does still do very good damage on placement, especially for a water unit, but he does have a passive that does nerf it over time, like after waves pass he gets way weaker. So he does have a nuke, by the way, on final upgrade. So because of his passive nerfing him after a few waves, I think he is kind of weak right now, like especially after the damage nerf. I feel like that was kind of unnecessary. I'd say low sub meta to high amazing still. He does really good damage, but overall, there are definitely better options in the game now that he's been nerfed. Okay, Noble Captain. This guy's gonna be really weird to talk about because I've personally never really used him and never really liked him, but I do know what he does. So he does have a nuke, which is going to apply a longer duration of hemorrhage and then also do, I think, 3 times his damage. He's more of a cheap early game unit who also does have some very good hemorrhage damage there. I believe he is either full AoE or a large circle AoE. I don't remember what it is on final upgrade. But the way his passive works, he's going to be buffed when paired with Rukia. So without Rukia, he's not going to do the best damage in the game. He's going to be like kind of weak, but he is a good starting unit, especially when paired with Rukia. If you're running one or the other, you might want to consider teaming them up. But overall, without Rukia, I'd say he's probably top of decent to low amazing. Now we have Topo, and this guy's another one where I haven't really used him much, but I do know what he does. He has a passive which makes him do a lot more damage to bosses. He also has, I believe, a nuke on final upgrade. Then he has the cripple passive, which can be pretty good. His AoE is also massive. He has like a huge circle, like an off-brand full AoE at this point. He only really does more damage to bosses. He's kind of like situational, but overall I'd say probably an amazing for sure. He's really good still. Now we have Noelle, which is another unit that I'm not too familiar with, but she did get buffed this update, and I've seen some screenshots of her doing crazy damage. She's up there on DPS now, just purely DPS. I don't think she has a passive if I remember correctly. She's always been just kind of pure damage. And after the buff, she is really usable for that. I think she is like an early game water option. She's not full AoE, she is hybrid though, and she doesn't have a passive. Overall, somewhere in amazing for sure. She does do really good damage, but the lack of supporting value is kind of something I take into account when I like rank units. So don't be mad if your units do like a lot of damage and they're ranked low on this list. It's because I really value support on a team, and you know, everyone has their own opinions. Oh yeah, the old Battle Pass unit we have hit here. I do like this guy a lot. If you watched my video on him, you'd know. I think he's pretty strong. How he works is pretty much he's going to do a lot more damage to enemies that are time stopped, and he has a time stop himself. When paired with a good time stop, he could be doing like crazy damage, but without a time stop and only himself for that, I'd say he's probably like a low amazing to high decent for sure. Jiren. Okay, this is going to be a pretty tough one to rank. I know a lot of people that like this guy and a lot of people that hate him. Feel free to fight me in the comments for what I'm about to do. But I think I'd say he's probably high sub meta. I know he used to be like the best unit in the game by far, but they did hit him with a nerf. And the way Jiren works is he has to be by himself to get like huge value out of his passive. So for AFK farming, this is the only unit in the game you're going to need. Like you can just put him down. When used with like multiplayer or any other units on your team, he's going to get a lot lower damage. And then they did nerf his crit damage this update. Overall though, sub meta if you know how to use them. Aizen. Okay, Aizen's very interesting, and I went ahead and dragged Sun Jin Woo up here so we can talk about it. So Aizen's damage by himself is not too great, but he does have a passive where he can get triple damage after getting, I think, 1500 kills. He's very expensive, so you don't want to run him in any game mode, but Infinite he is a monster. Aizen's pretty good. Don't get mad at me for this. I'm going to put him at the bottom of sub meta. They're just better options for like overall every game mode and DPS wise. And then Sun Jin Woo, he did get nerfed this update. He's very similar to Aizen though. Probably somewhere in amazing or like maybe even high decent, I don't know. He's just not very usable in other game modes because his damage besides the passive is very dated. Fear is a support unit, a very good one. I love this guy. I put him like right up here. He has pretty much a double fear passive, so he's full AoE and has double fear. Very, very good. Division Vice Captain is a decent unit. He's probably right about here. He's good for early waves if you need a light unit especially, but other than that, he doesn't have much damage for infinite potential. Robin is a support. I'm going to go ahead and make a new tier for farms real quick because I should probably do that. So if we were to rank all 3 farms in the game, I'd say that Robin is probably the worst of them because she costs 800 to place and her upgrades are expensive. So she's more of an infinite farm, but we don't really need that anymore because Idol is a buffer and a very good farm, so she can be used in infinites too. Idol's probably the best farm out of all of them. Yojin has always been like the progressive farm. He was the best for a while. With Idol's new Evo, she does make more money than him, especially with her passive that can go up to 20% increased cash depending on how many units are around her. And she also buffs units with her concert ability. So overall, very, very solid. Definitely go for Idol out of all of these. Yami. Okay, Yami got buffed. This is one of the Black Clover units that did get buffed. His damage is a lot higher now, and then he also has the pressure passive, which is the Aizen and Gon passive. Yami is ground only though, and I believe only a line AoE, so his damage is going to be limited to that line and only ground units, or ground enemies, but he does do some really high damage, and he does have the pressure passive now, so probably top of amazing or low sub meta. Very, very good. Goku Black. Okay, I remember when this guy was crazy, man. He had his time to shine. He still is very good. He's kind of like a convenient unit. Like, Needle Queen, where for legend stages or anything with a different element, you're going to want to just bring him and you can kind of clear it for the most part. I don't know. They did nerf Perfect Steel, which was kind of like a direct nerf to Goku Black, so he's kind of struggling. He's still very good. I'm just going to put him on top of Amazing though. I'm sorry. Apprentice Kai, the Madness form, did get nerfed this update. They just reduced his damage overall. So he is still pretty good. He has the passive to gain a bunch of damage after a few waves, so he's good in infinites if you want to rack up his passive. But I think at that point you might as well just evolve him into the fused form. So I'd say overall, somewhere in like low Amazing, because you might as well just evolve him. I don't know, he's still really good though. He is pretty good. Bobek, okay, we all love this guy, but we've got a lot to talk about with him, I think. He's up here for a couple of weird reasons. So he does have the slow passive, so he could be used as a support if you wanted a slow unit, which is kind of some value there. He is an early game heal unit, so if you wanted like early game hybrid damage, he would probably be somewhere in high decent, like right here. And he does have the passive to make more money from kills, so if you wanted to use him to farm up in the early waves, you could also use him as a farm. And that's a really weird spot to put him, so I'm hoping people actually watch the video and see why I put him here. I feel like because his damage is getting mid and there are a bunch of other units with the slow passive, we're going to throw Bobek in farm, because we can. Rogue Lancer. Okay, this guy is the first instance of a pay-to-win unit we have in ALS. But this guy actually gains 5% damage if you have the shiny form from the battle pass. Overall, the unit is very solid. On final upgrade, he is a full AoE unit with a passive to gain a 15% chance per crit to do double crit damage. So it's like a crit on top of a crit, which is really good in this game. And then he has an ability, which is going to nuke the enemies for, I think, 50 bill damage in his range, with a 300-second cooldown on 3x speed. Very, very solid unit. Full AoE water damage is crazy. He is also hybrid with the electrified passive. So I'm going to go ahead and say I think this guy is probably, with the crit passive, probably somewhere in the meta. I don't really know yet. There's no like DPS official info on him, but he's pretty solid looking. I'd say up here with the shiny form because of 5% extra damage. Pay to win unit, but yeah, we'll get more info on him in the future. Hopefully I'm not wrong, but I think he's pretty good. Trunks. Okay, I'm not gonna lie, I really hate this guy. Not like the actual character, but the unit. I hate when they do this passive where every 30 kills he gains less SPA for 25 seconds. That to me is like really lazy, and his damage is also kind of mid. This guy's always been kind of mid. Okay, I know I'm kind of flaming this guy, but I put Trunks here. Gojo. Okay, this guy, his damage is still pretty okay. He is hybrid replacement. His damage is kind of falling off though. He's mostly a support. He's like one of the better supports in the game, one of the best supports in the game. He's very similar to Goku, where he has a bubble around him. Goku actually kind of copied him with that. He has a bubble around him, which is going to reduce enemy movement speed by a ton, like the strongest slow in the game. And he also has an ability which is going to time stop, and then another ability which is going to nuke. So overall, very solid support unit. I put him right next to Goku there. And his damage is okay. I don't know if it's like really meta anymore. Maybe probably like indecent for damage, but he's just a support mostly nowadays. Rimuru. Okay, this guy's damage kind of fell off, but he is a full AoE fear unit on max upgrade, and he does have one of the most unique abilities in the game. Gilgamesh kind of stole it from him now, but pretty much any any enemy under 15% HP is going to be auto-executed by him, including bosses, so must have for leaderboard runs for sure. He's definitely a support unit more than anything now, and I'd probably put him like, in terms of value in a leaderboard run, definitely like high up there. He's a must-have for leaderboard runs, but I don't know, overall, maybe like right here. Okay, I need to start speedrunning because this video is getting way too long, but Gon. This guy used to have an ability, he used to be mostly a support, but he got completely reworked to be a late-game damage monster. He's very expensive, he is hybrid on placement if you need a nature unit. He's very, very good for that. Overall though, he is, I want to say like top of sub-meta or low meta, because he is the 6th highest damage in the game, which is very good. He also has the pressure passive. I might be biased because I've wished on him, but I think he's really good, and I'd put him in meta at least. Uchi is going in support. He's mostly just a support now. Full AoE is done with the reset the universe ability. Not important in progressive modes. Quincy King. This guy is also going to be more of a support now. He has a 10% damage buff, kind of like Ichigo or Zamasu. He is also going to have a 15 billion damage nuke. He is pretty cheap to get full AoE. I think it's on like upgrade 3 or 4. Then he is also going to have electrified on final upgrade. So he's pretty good as a support. I'd put him like probably right about here-ish. He's pretty okay. Nightmare Luffy did get nerfed this update. I think they just reduced his damage, which is kind of tragic, but nobody was really using him anyway, at least that I knew of, because he is a ground line AoE unit, I think. His damage is really good though, so I'd say maybe top of amazing to low sub meta. He is still pretty good for dark damage, but overall, there are a lot of units with like better damage and better supporting value, so I would recommend him. Frieza. This guy is an early game hybrid unit with the hemorrhage effect. He also has a special passive, but I don't really know how it works. I think it might be when more enemies are in his circle, he'll do more damage. I think he also has a nuke, which is pretty cool. Overall, probably low sub-meta to high amazing. He's pretty good. Very good for early damage. Maybe like right here, actually. He's very, very good compared to the other dark options. Alucard. Okay, this guy's kind of weird. I don't really know if his passive does a lot of damage anymore. It's like every 40 seconds, every bleeding enemy in his range is going to explode for a bunch of damage. He's full AoE bleed, though, and pretty good for dark damage. Overall, I'd say he's at least an amazing... Oh, that's Rengoku. He's at least an amazing somewhere. Probably like here-ish, I'd say. Rengoku is going to be at the bottom of meta. Very, very good for early game. He does some very good placement damage, and he has an ability which is going to buff his burn damage by 5 times. It used to be 3 times with his normal passive. Broly, this guy's also going in meta, and I honestly think I'm going to put him very, very high up there. Probably the top of the game right now. This guy did get nerfed with this update, but even after the nerf, he still does, I think, the highest damage in the game with his passive. And even without his passive, which is going to stack up his damage every wave, he is still going to do really good damage and have the critical passive and have a nuke ability. Overall, this guy's just really good, cheap unit, and very strong. Asta, okay, this guy got buffed with the newest update, and I honestly think it might put him in meta. I don't know. He's still hybrid. He's always been hybrid. His damage is really good, and he now has the stun and hemorrhage passives. So he's really good. I'd say he's a little bit expensive though to be meta, so probably like sub-meta, I guess. Pretty high sub-meta though, like maybe here-ish. We have the final units of the Fate update here, Archer, Saber, and Gilgamesh. Starting with Archer, I'm actually a huge fan of this guy. He has, I think, 2k placement. He's not hybrid on placement, but he gets it at upgrade 3, I believe, and he also becomes full AoE. So really cheap to get full AoE damage, full AoE hybrid damage, and also the bleed passive. Very good for damage. I think he's top 11 on the DPS chart on max upgrade. So very good. I'd say this guy's probably even meta. Like, he's usable in progressive, he's usable in late game. Very, very solid. Very, very solid. Maybe even above Rengoku, honestly. Rengoku, I love him, but Archer better. Saber Evo. Very good unit. I actually underestimated her a lot in my showcase video, but she has a passive that gives her 50% crit rate and 150% crit damage. She also has an ability which is a 15 billion damage nuke, and then also is going to buff her by increasing her damage and reducing her SPA for 60 seconds with a 300-second cooldown. So, overall, she does a ton of damage. She's number 2 on the DPS chart, very strong. Then she also has Hemorrhage, which is a little bit of supporting value, not too much, but it makes the enemies take a little bit more damage. So overall, I'd say probably above Lancer. We don't really have too much info on him yet. These two are kind of debatable right now, but Saber's really, really strong. The final unit of this tier list, we have Gilgamesh here, and I accidentally moved him into the farms tier and can't move him back. But I'm going to go ahead and put this guy in meta. He's very strong. He's the top 10 DPS in the game right now. He is an early game unit because he's only 800 to place, so if you have Idol, that is one way of farming. He's hybrid on placement with the cripple passive, and then on final upgrade, he gains an ability kind of like Rimmeru's. It is a nuke that is going to auto-execute enemies that are below 25% HP. It's also going to do like, I think either 50 billion or 100 billion damage to enemies all around the map. So overall, very, very good for infinites and early game. Probably right about here on the tier list. Some of these units are still getting like info out about them, and I'll probably have to make a new tier list or like adjust stuff in the comments, but overall, I think it's looking okay. Well, I think those are the final rankings. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. And if you're about to flame me or go off on me in the comments, please make sure you do at least watch the part of the video where I ranked the unit you're going to talk about, because on these like tier lists in these categories, it's kind of hard to rank them in this like basic meta tier list versus if we had tiers like meta for this game mode, meta for this element, and showed them multiple times, you know? So please do watch the parts where I explain about the unit, their strengths and weaknesses, because that's more important at the end of the day. So I know it's a lot of yapping, but I hope it was at least informational. I also want to give a huge thank you to all of our channel members. I think we have over 100 now because a bunch of you were gifted memberships during our live streams recently, and it really does mean a lot to have a bunch of support for the channel and community members here. So I really do appreciate all y'all. Thank you for supporting the channel, making these videos possible. Shout out to all my members out there. Anyways, thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed. We'll see you next one, and have a great day.